I wanted to talk about Lincoln Riley and or Jaden Hazelwood. Couldn't find the cut quick enough, but as we continue to think about what Oklahoma's offense has done, what it continues to do, and people continue to laud Riley for being able to use the talent at his disposal, the personnel at his disposal in the ways in which it works best, and only the ways in which it works best, I want to say that's what coaching is supposed to do. Like, somehow we let coaches tell us it's their system that works and it's their personnel that sucks. Or, you know, like you're looking at Chip Kelly out of UCLA, and he's got this really cool spread that he likes to run. But you know what? Those kids ain't good at running it, man. And you want to use all these motions and this design, and you want to still get beat down by a Cincinnati defense that just showed up and put their forearm in your throat and said, what are you going to do, son? Doesn't matter what your design is. You know, if your personnel ain't any good running it, don't run it. And while I have continued to point out the deficiencies in Jalen Hurts' game, Lincoln Riley knows there's things that Jalen Hurts can work on in his game. Jalen Hurts knows there's things that he can work on in his game. What you don't see Lincoln Riley doing is saying, hey, Jalen, that thing that you don't do very well, that traditionally has worked very well here, you're going to do more of that because my system works. No. Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray can throw the ball deep down the field and drop it into a shoebox. Jalen Hurts ain't that dude. So what does he do? He draws up a scheme where it takes advantage of what he does well. He can run, and he can complete the intermediate passes, and they have the personnel at wide receiver to get what is yak. And I'm not talking about Pinky, okay? I'm talking about Charleston Rambo taking a nice little dig route and going 56 yards to the house. I'm talking about Jaden Hazelwood doing very much the same thing, sitting down in the middle of the zone at 11 yards deep, taking an intermediate route, 42 yards, nearly to the house, right? But if you watch that play and you watch that play a little closer, you would see that there were other wide receivers that were open deeper down the field. And while Jalen Hurts had a superlative game, the best debut by an Oklahoma Sooner offensively ever, still wasn't great, and he knew that right away. Even as folks tried to blame local media who were just pointing out, hey man, there's a lot of records being broken here, saying, hey, you guys are being rosy about this. No, we're not. We're acknowledging that he's better than everybody else, and there's a lot that he could work on. If you're actually watching the game and you wanted to be a little bit more critical of how he played, you could see a couple of throws, particularly on the left side of the field, that he just didn't make or flat out missed. Like there's a deep throw that he tried to make to Nick Basquin early on that ended up out of bounds. And underneath that route, CeeDee Lamb had his arms up going, what? There's nobody here. I was wide open. And I was wide open like 12 yards deep. And Jalen knew that he missed it. They came back and they made it work. You're also not necessarily giving enough credit to just how good Bill Bedenbaugh and Riley are at drawing up run scheme. Because there's this play that Dan Orlovsky tried to outline on ESPN talking about, hey, he's made this a PRO or whatever happy term he wanted to use, when really it's a middle screen that they've been running for years. Baker Mayfield ran that screen. I mean, it's simply saying to your offensive lineman, are you smart? Because if you're smart, this is how we're going to use you. So you make sure that you pick up man-to-man over there. You have your left guard spying the middle linebacker. The middle linebacker goes to one side of the field, and then that left guard took off to go kick out the safety. And because he went to kick out number 3, you got Jalen Hurts, who ain't Baker Mayfield, who's a Mack truck running out there on his own. That's design. That's using your personnel to its best ability, but it's also Bill Bedenbaugh coaching him up on that offensive line, man. I marvel at what that guy is able to do, because you put 4 new bodies out there with one guy that knows what he's doing, and you move the guy that had been playing left guard for most of his career out to tackle to start the game. And what'd you get? You got 354 yards rushing and a 300-yard passer. So while Jaden Hazelwood is going to get a lot of mouth time, and Trajan Bridges is going to get a lot of mouth time, and at some point you're going to see Marcus Major, and you're going to see more of Ramondre Stevenson. Continue to watch this offensive line. Every great football program that you've seen, every great football team that has won championships has had an outstanding offensive line. And that's all Bill Bedenbaugh has done. Because it wasn't that long ago that people were looking at Bruce Kittle and Bobby Jack Wright and going, what are y'all doing? Why do we suck at offensive tackle? Why does Bob's buddy get to coach the offensive line? When are we going to get a real offensive line coach in here? So they went from having 2 line coaches, which is still kind of just wild to me, to saying to Bill Bedenbaugh, hey, man, come down from West Virginia and show us how to do this. And Bill made it real simple. He said, we're going to get bigger, and we're going to rep more, and we're going to be technically sound, and I'm going to just continue to have y'all learn this by rote, so that when you go out there, you predetermine who you're going to pick up, who you're going to block, where it's going to go. You can change where people's eyes are. You can change whether or not a middle linebacker or will linebacker's right. You can read an in. You can read a tackle, because your offensive line unit knows exactly what it's doing. So the more you think about, or I think about, the way that Jalen Hurts answered Holly Rowe's question about can you be a little bit happy about what you do, the more I'm like, all right, I see his perspective. I still don't agree with what he said, because in that moment, just throw a bone to everybody else who's watching this game, who in that moment wanted to say, hey, Jalen, this is really cool. This is really, really cool, and I feel fortunate to have seen it at Oklahoma. The more I'm like, okay, I get it where he's coming from. He knows that he probably graded out at a B-, probably C+, because he hit the throws he was supposed to throw, and he missed the throws that we thought perhaps a player of his caliber should hit. And we could talk about his decision to run or not run, and we could talk about fumbling the football, right? But outside of that, it's a really good offense, and it could be a really great offense once again, because all Lincoln Riley has done over the last couple of years is break records. He's set the record. He's broken the record. The NCAA's offensive records belong to him. And I'm interested to see how this continues to go, because it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about Urban Meyer as an offensive scheme genius and Dan Mullins as being the guy. It wasn't that long ago that we were talking about Jimbo Fisher and what he was able to do with guys like Jameis Winston. It wasn't that long ago that we were talking about what Chip Kelly was able to do at Oregon. It wasn't that long ago that Gus Malzahn was the future of college football everywhere, running his power spread, play action deep. When will college football catch up to Lincoln Riley? And when they do, how will he adapt? Because today it doesn't feel like there's anything that he cannot beat. But what I do know about football is that everybody catches up to you at some point, at one point or another. Even Bill Belichick is going to get caught. Nick Saban got caught. What is Lincoln Riley going to do when he gets caught? But they got South Dakota this week, so it ain't going to happen this week. Patrick, I wanted to ask you, as a guy, who more or less listens to me go on about OU football ad nauseum, what is it that you want to know?
With OU football, again, the thing that interests me about this team is obviously on the defensive side of the football, obviously in the secondary. One of the observations that we've talked about and I think was interesting is, look, it's one game. You can't take a lot away from one game. However, guys weren't looking to the sideline. When the ball was snapped, there wasn't guys with their arms extended out to their side looking back at a teammate. There wasn't guys running wide open. That's obvious progress, and hopefully that's something that continues. Do you feel that in the secondary, if nothing else, they're more organized?
Yes, I do. And I think that was an undersold subplot of what happened against Houston. They held Houston to 167 yards passing. And the first thing that most people want to do is say, well, look at the pass rush. Are you kidding? Like, they had the same kind of pass rush last year. And yes, a 4-man front is better than a 3-man front, and a 1-gap scheme is better than a 2-gap scheme, especially in college football. But give credit where it's due. There was, I want to say 20 minutes of football where they gave up not a single passing yard to De'Aaron King, who was passing for 270, 290 a game, depending on whether or not you want to count that half a game that he played going into the injury. So I think that secondary is getting better. We'll see what it means